Welcome to the Queer Confidence Podcast, the podcast to help you become your most confident queer self. I'm your host, he, she, they, Coach Alex Ray, and I haven't always been this confident. In fact, I used to be super insecure. And through this show, I want to share with you what's worked for me, my clients, and my guests so that you can become more confident. Hello, unicorns! I'm so excited for today's conversation. We are going to talk about masculine and feminine energy. And I want to talk about this today because I have, in the last couple weeks, have had several conversations about masculine and feminine energy. And I think the universe is just saying, hey, Alex, it is time to do this episode now, put it out there because people want and need this episode. So I am really looking forward to talking with you about masculine and feminine energy today. It's going to be so great. So before we get started, we have to define these things, right? What is masculine energy and what is feminine energy? So feminine energy is the receiving and processing. So it's a lot of thinking and feeling. Those are feminine energies, okay? And then masculine energy is a lot of the outward. It's the doing. It's the from you outward versus feminine energy is outward in and process. So those are just the simplest definitions for feminine energy and masculine energy, okay? And I want to remind you before we go any further that what we are not talking about is gender or gender roles here. We are talking about the energy of masculine energy. We are talking about the energy of feminine energy here. So that is what we're talking about. We are not talking about specific body parts. We are not talking about gender when we're talking about masculine and feminine energy. We're talking about the energies themselves. So society, my friend, society is what has trained boys to be in touch with only their masculine energy, and what has trained girls to be only in touch with their feminine energy. And it's interesting because, if you live in the US like I do, then you are probably accustomed to certain masculine and feminine role, we are used to certain cultural roles for boys and for girls, right? Now, those roles change depending on where you live in the world. So we know that gender really is a construct we've used as a social construct to kind of split different things up as, hey, this is, if you are born with the male sex reproductive system, then you should do these things with your life. And if you were born with the female sex reproductive system, then you should do these things with your life. And those things vary by culture, like I said. But what we're going to be talking about here is masculine energy and feminine energy. And the thing is, none of this is going to make any sense unless you understand that we are not our body. Your identity is not simply in your physical being. You are a spirit, an energy, having a physical experience. And so who we really are, our soul, our spiritual being, is in this flesh suit, in this meat suit. having experiences in the world, and we as humans are assigning labels and things in order to make sense of it all. And so, being that we are not actually the physical body that we're born into, we are so much more than that. We as spiritual beings have access to masculine and feminine energy. We have access to all of it. We are all of it. We're able to use masculine and feminine energy. And then society tries to train us into boxes and train us based on our physical body, what we should or should not do with our life, how we should and should not interact, and the roles that we would have, in relationships, in business, in anything. So much of what we hear, though, and what we get frustrated with when we're trying to have this conversation around gender and gender roles is there's a lot of frustration because we are like, hey, like, don't put me in a box, right? I hate being put in a box. I love to be my full authentic self. That's what confidence really is all about, isn't it? That is us being able to be our full authentic selves and enjoy and love being our full authentic self. But in this physical human experience that we are having, our brains function so much quicker on biases. And biases are just patterns that our brains have made up. They're just patterns to explain and understand the world so that we don't have to constantly be looking at everything like it's brand new. We can look at it from a place of understanding from our past experiences. Now, this is why things end up getting inaccurate, right? And why we make assumptions that end up turning out to be wrong. But let's take a moment here and just appreciate the magic that our brain is in the way that it does remember and associate things to help us live efficiently. Is it helpful? Most of the time, yes. Most of the time, our biases and assumptions that we're operating on help us be efficient. And that's what our brain is created for. The problem is, efficiency does not allow room for lots of questioning and lots of allowing. And that's what we as the LGBTQIA plus community, the entire queer community, that's what we're experiencing and being frustrated with society is that, hey, I don't want to be put in this box. Don't put me in this box. And the beautiful thing about you and I, my friend, is that we are already being more intentional about being our true, authentic self, that spirit or that soul, that energy that is having a physical experience, instead of relying on our physical bodies to determine our identity and what we should or shouldn't do. You and I are actually much more in touch with who we are than those who have not questioned who they are and what it actually means to be masculine and feminine, and what are these energies, and what does it mean to even be human. So, for a moment, let's just give a little gratitude, because I think it feels so much better to have gratitude towards the labels and biases that have helped society be fast and easy, right? Like assigning gender roles. We look at a body and we're like, oh, this is what you should do. There you go. It's made us very efficient, but the consequence of that is it has held us back from being able to constantly question and ask, hey, hi, I'm Alex. My pronouns are he, him, and this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is how to understand me. That's a lot of information. That's not super efficient. And the beautiful thing is that we're living in an era right now where we are going back to that and we're questioning it. And as a society, we're saying, hey, let's make room to understand that we are not just this physical body, and we aren't just these things that these nice little boxes that we've been stuck in for years. Those were efficient to make assumptions on, but they weren't authentic. And they weren't really allowing us to be free and to be ourselves. So the process of labeling is not necessarily malicious. It's human. And sometimes it also can be someone's malicious effort at controlling, right? Because if we can put someone in a box, we can make sense of it and we can predict. And when we can predict, we can control. And honestly, that's our human condition, that we are very afraid of losing control. So all of us, even the most open-minded of us, do still make assumptions and put people in certain boxes because our brain is just trying to feel safe by being able to predict and assume what somebody's going to do next. There is a long monologue on society and gender roles for you. All right. So let's look at the essence of the energies, masculine energy and feminine energy. And I want to first look at how they can harm people. And then we're going to celebrate how they are so helpful. Okay. So we're going to start with masculine energy, like toxic masculine energy, right? So, masculine energy, I want you to think about if you've been to, well, actually look on your screen at the podcast cover, right? You'll see there's a gradient on the right side, blue to magenta. And if you go to coachalexray.com, you'll see the header on my website. There's like a header that's a cyan to magenta gradient there as well. And the beautiful thing about that, which I didn't even think of this when I originally chose it, but it's a beautiful representation of just this sort of sliding spectrum of masculine and feminine energy. You can pick whichever color you want to represent whichever one, because you know what? We are not tied to making masculine blue and the magenta feminine. It's a spectrum. There's two different colors blending. Masculine and feminine energy, as spiritual beings, we have two blending. And when we are only in touch with one, that's when we run into trouble. When we have either toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. I think I added in too many times. Femininity. So masculine energy can be used to harm others by attacking, right? Masculine energy, again, is that outward focus. It's energy projected. So physically attacking, verbally attacking, it's outward. It's very visible. And that's why we're able to see a lot of in our society when we're seeing toxic masculinity. And it's very apparent because it's very easy to pick up on it with just observation, just looking at it. You can see someone being aggressive and you're like, oh, yep, toxic masculine energy. You can see someone going to attack another online, in person, like bar fights. There it is, toxic masculine energy. It's outward. It's being used to harm. Now, on the other hand, we can also have toxic feminine energy. And when I'm using the word toxic here, I'm meaning harmful. Okay, so harmful feminine energy can be used to harm others by manipulating, mind games. Feminine energy remembers that much more thinking, feeling energy. And you can use feminine energy in a negative way to harm other people by manipulating them. What's an example that we've talked about before on the podcast? People pleasing. People pleasing is a very feminine energy, and it's harmful. It's harmful to the other person, and it's harmful to ourselves. So I want to give you a couple examples of how masculine energy can be toxic and how feminine energy can be toxic. And I've purposely chosen some examples where we have different bodies. We have some male presenting bodies and some female presenting bodies behind the scenes using the energies, okay? So, y'all remember the story of Sparta, right? So if we go back to like our ancient history lessons of Sparta, it was a society that really trained the people to not feel. It was a very aggressive group, right? The Spartans were very aggressive. They were known for their battle, for their warfare, for being totally out of touch with their feelings, to be able to just kind of turn emotion and feeling off, not be afraid, not feel, and just go. Sparta was using a lot of toxic masculine energy. There wasn't a whole lot of feminine energy in there, was there? Not a whole lot of like thinking, feeling, strategizing, right? It was a lot of just like, we're going to muscle through it, okay? Another one similar was the Amazons. Do you remember the Amazons, which was I'm not sure if it was a tribe, a society, what the right word is for it, but the Amazons believed that women or female bodies were superior to male bodies. And so they were basically a tribe of women that, a society of women that were very aggressive, and they would go and attack places, and they would actually rape the men so that they could procreate and keep their society going. So you have the Spartans and you have the Amazons, two very aggressive groups, a lot of physical aggression. Okay. Now let's talk about toxic feminine energy. A couple examples of these. Okay. Here's a really interesting one that a friend actually brought up to me yesterday. One of these conversations that I mentioned before that I've had in the past couple of weeks. So she was reminding me that Hitler used feminine energy to manipulate the minds of an entire nation, right? If we look at what Hitler actually did, he didn't do so much of the actual acts of aggression himself. What he did was he manipulated the minds of people. He was able to tap into their feelings and their emotions to control and manipulate an entire country to do very awful things to the Jewish nation. Then we also have the feminist movement. There were two parts of the feminist movement. Okay, so there was the American Women's Suffrage Association, led by Lucy Stone, and then they were very much in favor of the 15th Amendment and making sure that Black men also had the right to vote as well as women. But then you had the National Women's Suffrage Association, which was led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So that group in the feminist movement was actually very toxic in the way that they used their feminine energy. And so that group believed that it was more important for women to have the right to vote than for Black men to be granted the right to vote. And so they actually partnered with the KKK and worked behind the scenes. They did a lot of the planning and the planning for like the political associations behind the scenes in order to get the right men elected to power so that they could grant the right to vote to women. And they knew that if they partnered behind the scenes with the KKK, that they could get some very zealous people on their side that were in power and could get them the right to vote, even though it meant keeping Black men from voting. And so the KKK movement, although like what we see on the surface was a lot of masculine energy, it was a lot of attacking physically and harming and really awful acts. Behind the scenes, the only reason the KKK was as successful as it was because there was a group of women in the feminist movement that were doing a lot of the planning to get certain people in the KKK elected to power in exchange for help with the women's suffrage movement. So that was a lot of thinking and strategizing, very feminine energy used there. And unfortunately, it perpetuated very harmful things. And so you can actually look at that scenario too as like an interesting blend, right, of how masculine and feminine energy were both used to harm people. There's a saying, right, that sticks and stones may break my bones and words will never hurt me, right? And we know that is like the biggest pile of bullshit ever. Here's a saying that I thought of while preparing for this episode that I think is so much more accurate. And it really describes the power of masculine and feminine energy. Sticks and stones, masculine energy, may break my bones. And ideas, feminine energy, can actually kill me. Sticks and stones may break my bones, and ideas can actually kill me. Both energies are ridiculously powerful. Both energies can be used to harm. We're going to lighten up in a minute, I promise. But let's also talk real quick about how these energies can also harm ourselves. How these energies, when we're only in touch again with only our masculine or only our feminine energy, how that can actually harm the host, the person. So when you're only in touch with your masculine energy, it leads to burnout. So toxic masculine energy can lead us to being burnt out. Feminine energy, feel, right, can lead us to a victim mentality. Toxic feminine energy can have us forgetting the power that we actually have and only seeing the possibility of receiving and therefore being a victim. So let's look, now that we have seen the bad of both, we're going to look at the good of both, because I promise you they can be used to harm, but they are so much better used to help. And what I really want you to understand by those examples is that toxicity, meaning only in touch with one and out of touch with the other, is what does the most harm. So instead of demonizing masculine energy or demonizing feminine energy, let's realize that both of them are good and can be used for good. And that neither one of them is the problem. It's not masculine energy that's the problem. It's not feminine energy that's the problem. It's the singular connection to either or instead of and masculine and feminine energy. So here's how feminine energy can be used to really help people. You could use it to be listening to a friend in a hard time, or the thinking and the planning behind policy change, feminine energy. Helping with masculine energy, protecting a friend, standing up for them. Getting out and telling people about those policy changes and later implementing the policy changes, the doing of it. The most successful world movements happen when feminine and masculine energies are blended together. We talked a little bit, I touched on the Holocaust earlier. Freeing the Jews from Auschwitz, masculine and feminine energy. You had to have the feminine energy to be thinking and feeling and empathetic for the Jews trapped there, and the planning for the strategy of how to rescue them, and the masculine energy of going through and carrying out the plan. Any social movement like women's suffrage or the gay movement's right had to have a blend of masculine and feminine energy in order to be successful, right? We had a lot of thinking behind the scenes, planning, strategizing, and the doing, getting out there and actually taking action on it. Art, dancing, acting. It's feeling and then letting it flow out into action. Self-development and growth. You're becoming more in touch with our thoughts and feelings and taking actions in alignment with them. Self-development is all about being in touch with your masculine and feminine energy. It's about having both. It's not about being one or the other. It's not about trying to manipulate or control them. It's about really being fully in touch with, who am I? And let me tap in and be with me. Let me think through. Let me feel all of my feelings. Let me not avoid them. Let me feel through them all the way. And let me go and take action in alignment with those things. Let me go and have my own back. Building a house just as you build yourself. Planning and designing with our feminine energy. Taking in, like, learning and processing that we get from experiences. Designing the most beautiful, amazing, wonderful, perfect home. And then carrying out through the building, the acting upon. So today, my friends, have both feminine and masculine energy. We queer people are set up to be the most impactful, most successful humans because we are setting aside gender roles already. We understand that masculine and feminine energy are both beautiful, necessary, and most powerful when blended. We are here to be our whole selves, not a small, constrained version of what society expects people to be. Be your whole queer self. Masculine energy and feminine energy. Let it blend. Let it become a beautiful, rich color that leads you through life. My friends, I'm so excited. I think this podcast of any of them might be the most liberating and freeing for you. So, permission granted to no longer hold back or feel afraid of that which is masculine and that which is feminine. Be all of it. Be all of you. Enjoy and lift up your feminine energy and your masculine energy. Use it all, be it all, and help others do the same. I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend so they too can become more confident. You can also help more people find the show by leaving a 5-star review wherever you listen. And if you want to become a more confident queer with support from yours truly, head to CoachAlexRay.com or use the link down in the show notes. I'm looking forward to working with you.